Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I am going to be filming the mid-year book freakout tag today, which I love filming. I love filming these types of videos in general. I loved filming tag videos like on my beauty channel years and years ago. They're just fun for me to film. So I've read 29 books this year. 29 books. My goal is 37. I always make it my age, so I feel like I'm doing pretty good. I think I'm like 9 books ahead of schedule or something like that. Yeah, 9 books ahead of schedule, which is awesome. But one thing that I can say starting off is I haven't had the best reading year so far, which is interesting. Usually by this point during the year, I have like at least one gold star book, and you guys know that gold star books are extremely rare, but they do come up sometimes, and gold star books are usually like higher than 5 stars, like books that are going to stick with me forever, like all-time favorite reads, and usually there's only maybe like 1 or 2 a year, if that. Last year I had like 4 gold star books, which was like a huge year for me. But this year I haven't read any gold star books, and I haven't read anything that's just like really stuck with me like wholeheartedly. And so I feel like I'm waiting for like a really, really good book still to like come around where I'm like, oh my god, like I love this book. And I just haven't had that yet. So I'm hoping the second half of the year I'm gonna have a little bit more luck. So let's see what the first question is. So the best book that you've read so far this year. See, like this is hard for me because I feel like in a way I haven't read a book that's just mind-blowingly good to me, to where I'm like, oh, this is hands down the best book that I've read. The first book that I read this year, and that was Whispers in the Roars by Kay Webster. Now the reason I'm picking this book specifically is because I feel like this book has stuck with me the longest. Like I feel like in a way this author just really did something creative with this book. There's a part of me that has issues with certain parts of it, like, and I talked about it in the wrap-up that I did of this book, like there are some elements that I'm like questioning on whether it's like weird, because like there was some weird stuff in it. Like it's a dark book. But like the way that she wrote this book, I think was just really well done. It was really interesting. You can tell she did her research. She wasn't stereotypical in how she wrote this character, and that's what I really, really liked about it. I feel like she just did a really good job with it, but she still made it really dark, really unnerving, really disturbing, and I can just really give her a lot of props for how well she wrote it. And it just took, I think, a lot of creativity. Okay, so the next question is the best sequel you have read so far. The best sequel I read this year was definitely this book. This is House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. Now don't get me wrong, there are some issues with it. I talked about it in the wrap-up video. You know, there was definitely some slow spots. Bryson Hunt kind of got on my nerves a little bit in this one, but I have to say, the feeling that I had at the very end of this book just was like nothing I've ever experienced while reading. It was like such a shock and like so... It just made me feel so many feelings, and I just haven't had that in such a long time, and it was so fun to just dive into this world and like learn more about the characters, and it was just good. Like it was just a good story with a lot of interesting shenanigans, and Rune is one of my new favorite characters. Like I love it when I find a character that I really, 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 really love, you know? And I feel like it's rare when I find one of those like really major comfort characters, and I feel like Rune became one of my comfort characters after reading this book. So I think I'm gonna pick this one for best sequel. New release you haven't read yet but want to. So this is easy. Of course, my favorite author of all time, Blake Crouch. He came out with Upgrade recently, and I cannot wait to read this. I've heard amazing things about it already. Blake Crouch is a phenomenal writer. If you've never read any of his more recent books, you have to please pick one up because they're just so thought-provoking. He does such an amazing job at like thinking of really, really, really unique plot lines. And this one I am so excited to read. Like I'm probably going to pick it up next if I'm being honest, or very, very, very soon. The next question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So this is a really hard question for me because I don't keep track of like release dates. This is not something that I really care that much about. It's more so like when I see a book that I want to read, then I will just either pick it up or I will put it on my TBR, but like I don't really keep track of when they come out. Does that make sense? Like if I want to buy something, I'll just buy it, you know? Okay, so here's one. I added this to my TBR. Taylor Jenkins Reid, Carrie Soto is back, and that comes out August 30th. So I think it sounds really interesting. You guys know I love her writing. I haven't read the Malibu Rising book yet because I've heard so things about it, but I'm hoping Carrie Soto is back is gonna be really good, hopefully. So let's cross our fingers. All right, so the next question is biggest disappointment. So for my biggest disappointment, I'm gonna go with Queen of Hearts by Colleen Oakes. I would say that this is probably my least favorite book that I've read this year. It just didn't have much of a plot. It ended open-ended, but I kind of was like, it needed something to end it because I feel like there was really no plot throughout. And so like the fact that it ended open-ended, it just felt like a giant introduction to a story, but with no real purpose. Like that's kind of what I feel like this book was. I feel like she did an okay job building the world up and stuff like that, but just overall this book was really boring. I mean, it is a YA, and I've always really loved the cover of this book. I think it's really, really pretty, but it just was extremely disappointing. And I'm somebody that loves Alice in Wonderland. I've always loved it ever since I was a little kid, and so I was hoping that this would be good, and it just wasn't good. So the next book is The Biggest Surprise. So my biggest surprise would probably be Behind Her Eyes by, who wrote it? Sarah Pinborough. So I read this recently, and I'm going to add this to my next, reading wrap-up or whatever to talk more deeply about it. But the reason I'm putting this in biggest surprise is because the twist was so surprising. I thought, like, I knew what the ending was. Like, I was like, oh, I know where this is going. And I was right. But then, like, she just threw in this complete, like, game changer at the very, very, very end. Like it completely, you were like, wait, hold on a second, what? Like you think you know where it's going and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, never mind. And I love books like that, and I feel like it's really, 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 really rare to be completely caught off guard like that. Like especially now, I feel like a lot of times I'm kind of predicting the end, but with this one, like the very, very final twist, I feel like was almost impossible to predict. So I loved it, and it was definitely one of the biggest surprises, other than House of Sky and Breath. Newest fictional crush. I mean, obviously Rune. Like, he's my new favorite character. He's my new favorite, like, comfort character. And he was just so sexy in A Court of House and whatever. That whole little romance he had, like, that's what I was wanting out of, like, Bryson Hunt. And I wasn't getting it with Bryson Hunt, but I got it with Rune and his little love interest, like, oh, I loved it. Newest favorite character. Okay, well obviously Rune, like that's a obvious one. Okay, so I have two that I could choose for this. So I'm gonna either go with Tierney in The Grace Year, and the reason I wanna go with Tierney is because I can relate to Tierney a lot in this book. Like I feel like Tierney had a lot of personality traits that I have, and I really, really like that about her. Like, when you could just pick a character and you're like, I feel like I'm very much like her, or she's very much like me. Like I can relate to why she's doing what she's doing and the decisions that she's making and the questioning that she's doing. Like I feel like it's the same type of way that I would react in the situation that she was in. And that's what I really, really liked about her character, was because I felt like I was sort of reading myself in a way. And I love it when I can connect so much to a character. Like a lot of times I can pick out like little things like, oh, it kind of feels like me or whatever. But this was like one of those very profound characters where I was like, I just feel like I relate so much to Tierney. She had an element of like naivety to her, but she was also very skeptical, and she asked a lot of questions, and she, in a lot of ways, she was just very much like me. It's like this weird juxtaposition of naive but also skeptical, and she did a lot of questioning as well. And I feel like it's a really hard like combination to have in a person, but she did it really well with Tierney, and I feel like in that way I related a lot to her, and I just really, really liked her character and kind of like how everything kind of like came together in this book. Well, I didn't love how everything came together, but like just how everything played out for her was just, in a way, I could sort of relate in a little bit of a way. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah. So another character that I loved was Ziva. I really liked her character. I wouldn't say that she's like my favorite. I definitely feel like I like Tierney more. But the thing about Ziva and why I'm choosing her as like a new kind of favorite is because she was so unique. She had social anxiety, and I feel like that's super, super rare in books, especially when it's written as like a main character trait, and like how she overcomes her social anxiety and how she works through some of the feelings that she has. Like I feel like a lot of her thought processes were really, really interesting to read, and I feel like a lot of people that are even just shy can kind of relate to like some of the feelings that she has throughout this book, and I think it was really cool to kind of see her work through her anxieties. And I just think it was a really unique way to write a fantasy heroine, because it's really rare to see like timid heroines. They're always like these strong fighter women that have like, that are really blunt and honest and like brash. You know what I mean? They're always like that. But I feel like it was really cool to see a character that wasn't, but she had to kind of work through them to, you know, help her and her sister and all that kind of thing out. So really, really liked her character. I thought it was very, very unique, and I wish that more writers would kind of work some of those interesting traits into their characters. Like I wish I saw like maybe a dyslexic character or like an ADHD character. You know, I just feel like all characters sometimes feel the same, and that character was unique, which I really appreciate. A book that made you cry. Like I always say, I'm not a big crier when it comes to reading. I never like just like full out sob when I read. I've never had a tear fall down my cheek when I read. But a lot of times it's just like my eyes glaze over and I can like feel like the wetness in my eyeballs, you know what I mean? And the book that did that to me this year was When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. Now, this book is such an amazing read. Highly recommend everybody to read this. It's about a doctor who basically is questioning life. Like his whole entire life, he's very obsessed with like the existential questions of life, you know? And he ends up getting diagnosed with cancer, so he is basically facing the end of his life. But there was this area at the end, and it was not even a part of his story. Like he didn't write this part, it was his wife that wrote it. And there was something about it that made me tear up. I think it was this part. I'm ready, he meant, to remove the breathing support, to start morphine, to die. And that doesn't sound super sad like when you're reading it out of context, but when you're reading it in context, like, it's sad. A book that made you happy. Obviously, a book that made me happy was Hook, Line, and Sinker, the Bellinger Sisters, #2. Just love it. I love anything Tessa Bailey writes, I swear. I'm like a Tessa Bailey fangirl. The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. Oh, so flippin' cute. Like the ending of this book gave me so much anxiety. Like there were parts in the end of this book where I was like, oh, but then obviously, you know, it's a romance, so it ends really cute. And I just remember like feeling all the feels at the very end of this book because you spend so much time with these characters. Like they just really, she just builds up these characters so much. And I feel like sometimes in romances that are really short, you just don't have enough time learning about the characters to really like have that like strong feeling at the end. And that's when you spend so much time with them that feeling that you get when you read a romance was definitely there. Like you were just so happy that they, you know, got to be together, and it was just very, very satisfying. So love this, and it made me very, very happy at the end, and it was a great book. Most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I think that this is the most stunning cover ever. I think it's so pretty. Like the illustration on the cover is just, it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I only gave this book 3 stars. I probably could have given it 2. It wasn't like my favorite thing in the entire world. It kind of reminded me of like Ocean at the End of the Lane, just not as like interesting, or like I just didn't feel as strongly for the characters, but like, oh, this cover, hands down one of the prettiest books that I have read this year, and I really want to face it out, but I just feel kind of weird doing that because I didn't really like the book all that much, so. And is it last but not least, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So I have my reading journal right here, and I wrote down the top 10 books that I wanted to read in 2022. I've read 3 of the books that I wanted to read so far. I read Unkindness of Magicians, Blade of Secrets, and The Fine Print. And the other books that I have on the list that I still haven't read yet that I need to read if I want to read all of these is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut, My Dark Vanessa, which I really want to read that. I might read that soon actually. House of Salt and Sorrows, which I cannot wait to read that. I think I'm going to read that kind of in October. Because I feel like it has like a darker vibe to it. A lot of people relate it to like The Wicked Deep, which is one of my favorite books, so I can't wait to read that one. Starfish by Akemi Dawn Bowman. I just heard really good things about that book. Roses and Rot by Kat Howard. So I actually didn't realize that Kat Howard wrote Roses and Rot and Unkindness of Magicians. That shocked me. Like I had no idea that it was the same person, but Unkindness of Magicians for me was only a 3-star read. It was very politically heavy, and I wasn't a huge fan of that, so now I'm like uncertain if I want to read Roses and Rot because it is by Kat Howard as well. So if you've read Roses and Rot and you think I'm gonna like it, then let me know, but now I'm like unsure if I really want to read it as bad as I did. So, and last but not least is The Night Swim by Megan Golden, which is a thriller, and I still want to read that one as well. So those are the books that I still need to read if I want to read all the books on my top 10 list. So that is it, you guys. That is my mid-year book wrap-up, or whatever, book freakout tag, is that what it's called? I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I can't wait to film my next video for you guys, which is going to be my worst books I have read according to Goodreads and whether or not I agree with Goodreads ratings. So that is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.